I want to come back on some comments which have been made about the assumption that I dislike Farage. I don't particularly dislike Farage. I dislike a lot of what he stands for. As for Farage himself, the people that I've spoken to, the people that know him, say that he's a perfectly reasonable and charming individual, and it would be very nice to have a drink with him. In my case, it would be tea. In his case, it would be a pint. I would settle on a good malt, but who knows? Anyway, to go to the issues, Farage is quite right to call out the Prime Minister for the attempt to abolish jury trials, or in the great majority of cases. According to the recent court system data in England and Wales, only about 90% of criminal cases are dealt with in the magistrates' courts without a jury. Of the remainder that go to the Crown Court, only a fraction result in a full jury trial. Some sources estimate that overall that's less than 1% of all criminal cases today are resolved by jury verdicts. Others cite around 3% of criminal cases reaching Crown Court level, of which many are resolved by plea rather than by trial. Thus, the jury trial cases are indeed a small minority of overall cases, and maybe if Keir Starmer and his Justice Secretary want to reduce that, they should offer the option of a judge-led Crown Court trial without a jury, as a way to reducing costs. This is a cost-cutting exercise, but I find it disturbing that once you take away a right, that right never gets put back, and it is a right which goes back to Magna Carta to have a trial by jury for any option. That is the right, and so to say that it's only this number, this percentage of people who would be involved in that, is to say this is not important because it doesn't affect everybody. The same issue was put forward about the farming tax. It only affects a small percentage of people. VAT unfairly applied to only some. Only a few were affected. That doesn't by itself erase the injustice suffered by those few. In the criminal justice system, jury trials tend to handle the most serious offences, the ones with the greatest potential loss of liberty or social stigma, and the fact that a minority of cases go before juries doesn't reduce their importance. Replacing jury trials with judge-only trials may speed up processing and reduce backlogs, the rationale given by the reformers, but it also removes the safeguard of 12 ordinary people judging the facts. A democratic check on state and prosecutional power, arguably more critical when stakes are highest. When a ham-fisted authoritarian government prosecutes someone unfairly, the damage is not proportional to the percentage of cases. The injustice for that individual may be life-changing. One instance of injustice is enough to make us question the system. Therefore, the small percentages argument doesn't provide moral or constitutional justification for doing something so egregious, so destructive of the historical precedent of it is an axe at the foot of history. There are additional concerns beyond statistical summaries, underfunding, backlog. These are real problems, but critics argue that number crunching alone misses deeper structural issues: staffing shortages, insufficient court capacity, delays in prosecution and defence, which won't necessarily be solved by removing juries. The perception of fairness and legitimacy for both victims and defendants may suffer. A judge-only system risks reducing public confidence, especially in sensitive or controversial cases, for example, allegations of sexual offences, fraud, political crime, and so on. Hence, abolishing jury trials, because they constitute a small share of cases, risks trading long-standing safeguards for justice for expedience. As for Farage and his claims against the BBC and historical racism, the BBC did it too, his claim, that is a weak counter-argument. So he is right to say that at the moment we are facing an authoritarian government that is running roughshod over historic rights and privileges that our country has upheld for years. He is right to say that. He is he would be wrong to say that the allegations of racism against him can be offset by allegations of racism about the BBC. The show, the black and white minstrel show, ran on television from 58 to 78. It relied on blackface, with one season as an exception, white performers darkening their skin, adopting exaggerated caricatures of black people common to the minstrel show tradition. By the late 1960s, it was already being criticised as offensive and racist. In 1967, a petition by the Campaign Against Racial Discrimination demanded its cancellation. Internal BBC memos described it as an insult to coloured people. Scholars and critics now regard the programme as emblematic of a racist past in British media, and particularly on the BBC, a legacy of demeaning stereotypes and disregard for black voices. Hence, there is no serious dispute that the BBC aired content now widely judged as racist. Some mothers do have love thy neighbour and so on. But that doesn't vindicate bullying or the racist remarks by public figures like Nigel Farage, or the allegations of racist remarks by public figures like Nigel Farage. Firstly, the racism of past BBC programmes was institutional and collective, reflecting broader social norms of the time. It is meaningful to criticise the BBC for that history. Second, even if one accepts that everyone did it back then, that doesn't excuse an individual's own past conduct. Even if one accepts that a figure like Farage is accused of personal racist or anti-Semitic remarks, as has been alleged, that must be examined on its own merits, regardless of institutional histories at media outlets. The third point, they also did wrong, is a deflection, not a defence. It shifts the burden, but does nothing to address whether the individual's conduct was acceptable. It matters of personal responsibility. The facts that others erred doesn't erase the error. So pointing to the BBC's racist past could be legitimate historical criticism, and is, but using it as a shield against allegations of personal racism is morally and logically weak. And the personal racism that Farage is alleged to have indulged in was a racism predicated on bullying. That is not something which is alleged of the BBC. So Farage's defence, this particular line of defence, conflates institutional failure with individual conduct and changes nothing about the need for accountability. He has a press conference scheduled for 3 o'clock this afternoon. I'd be very interested to see what he has to say in it. I may be teaching at that time, but according to recent reports, Farage is expected to respond to these allegations, possibly doubling down on his criticism of the BBC. The BBC is rightly criticised. So is the present government rightly criticised for its authoritarianism, just as the BBC should be criticised for its racist content in the past. It'll be interesting, however, to observe whether he offers any new evidence, acknowledges any fault, or sticks with a both sides did it line. What we should judge him on is not whether others, like the BBC, were guilty, but whether he himself can responsibly account for past behaviour or apologise if warranted. And as I say, as for this sort of percentage thing which the present government is coming out with, this is nonsense. And it has been nonsense from the beginning, with the VAT on schools, with the farming tax, and now with the juries. This is all about a defence of an authoritarian system over ordinary people, and it is repugnant. It doesn't mean Farage is right. It doesn't mean Farage is the alternative. That's it. It doesn't mean Farage is the alternative. It may mean that Farage is correct in what he's saying. Who doubts that? People can be correct for many reasons, and we should acknowledge that. We should acknowledge when Farage is right. But that doesn't mean he is suitable as the next Prime Minister.